CCLT is comprehension-based communicative language teaching. Now what's happened? Sorry, why doesn't this work? I promise. I can't get the page to turn.
Did you click on your presentation?
Yeah. Resume share. Slideshow from current slide, but it's not letting me. Oh, there we go.
There.
Sorry. So I'd like to acknowledge the land of the Bunurong people upon which I'm presenting today, to the elders past, present and emerging. Can you see me in the, can you see my face anywhere on the screen? Because I need to do actions as well.
Yeah, we can see you.
Yes. Okay. Konnichiwa, Hara sensei desu. Dozo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. What do you think I've just said? I would ask the students and they would generally say, oh, well, you probably said hello and that you're Hara sensei, and they won't know about the rest of it. And they don't have to know because I want them to hear Japanese straight up. But when I'm pointing to my nose, I bring in the cultural aspect of how Japanese point to their nose when they mean themselves, compared to when Australians point to themselves, they probably point to their chest. In the context of my school, I teach at a primary school with about 620 children from foundation to grade 6, and I teach them once a fortnight for 45 minutes. What I'm about to show you is how I taught for 11 weeks after remote teaching. Our remote teaching last year during COVID, specialists weren't compulsory. So I assumed that some students did know Japanese for the entire time. My goal of last year was to prepare our grade 6 cohort for going into their next language at secondary school. It may not have been Japanese. Our feeder school, sorry, we are a feeder school, and the local secondary school teaches Japanese and Indonesian. So I wanted to be able to give them second language learning skills that could be applied to either Japanese or Indonesian. And then for next year, which is now, I wanted to be able to prepare my grades 3 to 5 for more of a TPRS type experience where we'd be creating our own class stories. I think Catherine mentioned we're always up against, why do I have to learn a language? You know, being in Australia where we don't have borders, I think it's quite embarrassing that we're a monolingual country when it comes to formal language learning. And yet we've got a wealth of different nationalities living here. So I tell my students, we're learning to communicate in Japanese and understand how the Japanese language works. That's actually in our scope and sequence. And why we're learning is we're learning another language to look at the world differently. So I'm just trying to sell it at the very beginning. I think this is a beautiful quote from Nelson Mandela, because if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you can talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. If I'm going too quickly, I need somebody to unmute themselves. So I tell my students there are 2 rules pretty much. You have to listen with the open mindset of understanding and listen and make an effort to understand. So I'm really, what I'm trying to drive home to them is that they have to listen. So my classroom management strategy, I've got to call and respond. On the board, I write down the classes that I'm teaching for the day. And I've tried to incorporate Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language, into my lessons as well. And the way to say thank you in Auslan is like this. Hope you can see what I'm doing. And every time I notice that they're absolutely silent, I might look and say, oh, arigato. And their response is arigato gozaimasu as a whole class. And the reason I do that is because they tend to stumble over gozaimasu. They're hearing ohayo gozaimasu every day at school, whether I'm in the classroom or outside. So their understanding is really great. But when they come to responding, they don't get as many opportunities to respond. So arigato gozaimasu is what we're practicing all the time. Oh, sorry, going back to this. And the reason why I've got the tics, at my school, we have a specialist class of the week. It's quite competitive amongst the teachers, I think more so than the students. And every time they're silent, I'll put a red tick up on the board. So they understand how many ticks they need to get closer to class of the week. Just piggybacking onto Catherine's motivation, different kinds of teaching and learning activities. There's a transition from fun and repetition to more structured, reflective opportunities for learning and a sense of progression and achievement. And I've taken that from a PD that I did during COVID, which is based on research in primary languages at the University of Southampton. And I'll put the link up for that later. If you get a chance to do that, that was brilliant. So what we've learned is we've got to go slower and deeper, which is limiting the amount of vocabulary. And let me try and explain this slide. So CCLT for me is based on explicit teaching, total physical response, and we've got different things out there. Auslan, I know about AIM and the Japanese Shuwa project, and then moving on to the TPRS, the reading and storytelling. This is based on John Marzano and John Hattie's agreed strategies, which I'll also put that up. So everything I'm telling you today and what I've tried is actually based on research. So my lesson format, I have a learning intention, explicitly teach one grammar point, which I think I was asking Missy if that was, you know, the way to go. Use realia images, give lots of slow, simple input. I'll do a comprehension check, which I'll show you in a minute. We play a game or an activity, and then there's a second comprehension check. Remember, this is all in a 45-minute lesson, taking into account getting them into the classroom, packing up, getting them out again. So my comprehension check is, I always ask the children, how well have I explained something, so that I take the pressure off them to say how much they understood. I said, it's based on how well I explained something. And I said, and if I didn't explain it very well, if I didn't explain it very well and it was rubbish, give me a 1, because I need to know how my explanations are going. If you think it's good, you know, 3, 4. If you think I did a brilliant job, give me a 5. And they see this slide again and again. I'm really looking for the student who's giving me a 1, because that's the student that I want to focus on to make sure that they understand by the end of the lesson. And to be honest, I don't get many 1s. So every lesson, we go through this circle. And I learned this through doing a PD with Terry Waltz a few years ago in Melbourne. It's got to be interesting, personalised, understood, repetition, breeds success, back to interesting, which I know we all aim for, but I just need to see these things again sometimes. I'm going to try and play this video, and I need somebody to tell me if you can't hear it. I've set my audio, so I think it'll be okay. You'll notice in the background, I've got my word wall. My room is quite sparse because I want the students to be concentrating on my pronunciation or things that I'm pointing to. Let me see if this works.
I think when you share your screen, you have to click the button in the bottom left-hand corner that says share audio.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, hang on.
So go back to share, yeah, pause it there and then go back to share screen.
Oops, hang on. Bottom left. Oh.
Yep, but you have to go to your share screen. Yeah, there you go.
Into my share screen.
So like in your view options, one of the options is share, new share in the Zoom.
Yep, sorry. I did actually practice this and then I had to restart my computer. Hang on, I might have to, do I have to stop
Yeah,
sharing?
do that. Stop sharing and then share again. And on the screen where you pick your screen that you're going to share.
Oh, I've got it. Yep, sorry.
There you go. Yep. Yay.
Yep. I promise. I did practice this and then I had to.
I've messed that up 100 times. So much better than me.
Number one thing.
So this.
So you share. Oh, now what have I done? Hang on. Got it. Hopefully you can hear.
I've got some gestures.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay.
This term, and the first one I taught the students was Arigato, because I wanted them to do a call and respond. So whenever they are absolutely quiet, I'll say Arigato, and they'll respond with Arigato gozaimasu. Arigato. We also first off learned hi and ie for when we're playing our celebrity head. We have neko, because they only need to know one animal and we can do heaps with that. I've then taught them tabemasu. So anytime I say tabe, I've got my 2 chopsticks and I tabemasu. I explain about a Japanese teacup. Doesn't have a handle, so it's hot, and it's nomimasu. You drink it slowly, so you're not bringing it up to your lips. It's just nomimasu. Nan desu ka? Nan desu ka? So I imagine there's been an earthquake, and I've stopped, and I say, what was that? Nan desu ka? I point to my name badge and say, onamae wa? Gesturing to the student. Onamae wa nan desu ka? Any negative verbs, whether it's tabemasen, tabemasen, or nomimasen, nomimasen. Students have heard yoku dekimashita, yoku dekimashita a lot for past tense. So I might say tabemashita and point over my shoulder. So tabemashita, nomimashita, or it might just be shimashita. I think that's it for now. Jane.
Okay, that was in case the video didn't work so that I could go through the gestures. Okay, so in my room, I've got a word wall and I've set it up specifically adjectives, nouns, verbs, so that I can remind students that the verb goes at the end in a Japanese sentence. And I build this up slowly as I teach. So it just doesn't start like that. So I use a lot of cognates, and I don't teach them specifically, explicitly. I just say them and I ask them, what do you think an orangey might be? Ah, orange. What do you think a banana? And they go, and banana. So that saves a lot of time. I have to confirm that they know what a noun is. So I start teaching this at grade 3. And if they don't know what a noun is, we go through it again. When I'm introducing vocabulary, I'm using full sentences, and I start with des because I want them to see how fantastic des is. You know, it's for plurals and singular, and you can say heaps just with using des. So I use mnemonics, and I've got pictures that are up on that word wall. Some of them I've just made up myself, anything to help them remember. And I always say, green apples make you go faster. And they say, this is after explaining ringo des. And they say, really? And I say, yeah. Same thing with ninja, eat ninjin to see better in the dark, because we do a lot of stuff with ninja at school. One of the great games we play is Celebrity Head. This can be used for any new vocabulary. I don't force output because I want them to enjoy the lesson, and I also want them to just understand my pronunciation first. So I might pretend we've just been doing, what are we doing? Oh, we're doing food. And so I might ask the students if they are nan desu ka? And somebody might say tomato. Tomato desu ka? So I'm repeating the full sentence, and the rest of the class is just answering hai or iie. The reason why I was doing all these different activities is because after COVID, we couldn't use any shared materials. So it was a case of what can I use without props, and that's really quick and easy to get set up without a lot of preparation. So on my word wall, I've got, I teach one verb per lesson. So actually, no, that's not true. Sorry, we did tabemasu and nomimasu at the same time, but I had the actions to go with them, and I confirm knowledge of verbs first. If they don't know what a verb is, that's where the English literacy comes into the lesson. And after listening to Craig this morning, I think, and Nathan, I realised that these personal question and answer interviews are actually a precursor to the, I can't think what it was now. I have to think about it.
Describe the situation.
Thank you very much.
Or triangling too, because you're asking them for a full sentence or.
Yeah, no, I don't. Sorry, I don't ask for the full sentence. So the way this works, and because I teach 620 children, and because we've been in COVID, and I couldn't, to be honest, I couldn't remember a lot of their names. I only ask for volunteers. I try and get as many people involved as possible. That's why I've got one student pretending to, well, she's holding a microphone, and I'll ask the students with, I don't know if you can see me now, but their gesture is, onamae wa nan desu ka? And they only have to answer their name. Sam. Sam-san desu ne. And then I'm talking to the rest of the class. Sam-san desu ne. Sam-san, tomato tabemasu ka? And he only has to answer, you know, yes or no, that he eats tomatoes. Hi. Oh, wow. So now I'm looking at the class again and I'm relaying the information. Sam-san wa tomato tabemasu? Sugoi desu ne. And I've got sugoi. They've heard sugoi a lot. And I've also got that up on another part of the room so that they're understanding what's going on. Sugoi desu ne. Sam-san, Kohi o nomimasu ka? So doing the gesture, if you can see, kohi o nomimasu ka? And he might say, yeah. Oh, Sam-san wa kohi o nomimasen. So we go through these questions and I just relay the information. I ask the rest of the class, so what does that mean? And they're always confirming their understanding, which hopefully catches up somebody if they're not quite sure. At the end of the activity, I always do that comprehension check. So usually if somebody's, if that person who gave me a 1 at the beginning, after the activity gives me a 3, I said, excellent, I know I'm on the right track. Confirming knowledge of adjectives. Here I've just got our 4 house colours. In the earlier years, we've done, topic-based colours, but for purposes of what I'm trying to do, I figured they really only need the 4 house colours. And I've set them up so that they can see them used as adjectives, because earlier on they've only used them as, they've only learned them as nouns in a particular song. Discuss, so this is a bit of pop-up grammar, the difference between I and not adjectives. Always along the way there'll be incidental culture, so we play an Oni game early on in the prep years. I realised I hadn't shown the students Momotaro, this particular cohort, so I bring that in later on. This is, with this picture, I can spend a lot of time revising colours, let me see, akai oni desu ka? Yes or no. Kiroi gakusei desu ka? I know it sounds really basic, but it's just, the purpose is revising the colours. I teach them an action for neko, for cat, and it's the beckoning cat. So we talk about the story. Everybody's seen one in a restaurant, because I want them to only need to teach them one animal, so that later on when they're using a vocabulary list, they know where the animal or the person sits in the sentence. When I bring in a little bit of kanji, the time that they've seen kanji is days of the week earlier on in a topic of the hungry caterpillar. I've got posters in my room as well, which I can show you later on. And I do physical oki, where I sort of stand like I look like a kanji for big. And I crouch down with my arms beside me like a little chick for chisai. Human sentences are an absolute hoot. So I only ever ask for volunteers. Everyone usually wants to get involved somehow. And what I've got happening here is so I start with neko desu, okay? And we all know, what is a neko? Neko desu, what's it mean? Well, it's a cat. So we're pretty confident with desu. Neko wa akai desu. So now I'm starting and I'm saying neko wa, and I explain what is like a flag. I said, we're talking about the neko. The topic is neko, and guess what? Later on, I don't have to mention neko again because you don't need to. All right, once I've told you what the topic is, we all know what's going on. So we've got in this picture, if this makes sense, oki neko wa, and then he eats something, and I've forgotten to add it in. So tomato o tabemasu. Akai sandoichi o tabemasu. I know what I've done. I've put them around the wrong way. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I add one child. I do one sentence, and then I'll add another child in. And what I'm doing is I'm switching around the adjectives and the food or the drink, and I'm getting the students to act it out. I'm always repeating what's happening in Japanese. And I'll ask the students, so now what's happening? And the rest of the students watching will answer, oh, okay, the red cat is eating blue sandwiches. I said, yay, sugoi, you know, so it's a really silly sentence, a really silly story that I'm actually telling, but it gets people up and moving. And I have found that I need to have one student there pretend to be a full stop, just so that they can see, you know, how the sentences work. You want to get as many kids involved as possible. I can go more into that later. And this story, what we're acting out, is actually the story that I'm building up to, that I've already created about the cat. Because remember, I had 11 lessons to get some skills into my students before they went on to high school. Let me see. So now we're looking at tense. So we've got present tense, negative, and past tense. And we're just dealing with shimasu. The time that they've all heard a negative verb is when I've done the role since foundation. If somebody's not at school, I've just said, ah, san-san wa imasen. So they know imasen. And I want to, that's the hook that I want them to use for any time they hear a word that has masen, it means it's negative. When it comes to mashita, they've heard hundreds of times, yoku deki mashita, you know, you did well. Okay, so with my list of activities here, which are all in katakana, I don't go into katakana at all, but I introduce it. So what do you think dance might be? Dancing. What do you think football? Football. So they'll hear it first, and then I'll introduce dance o shimasu. Dance o shimasen. And we ask, you know, what do you think that means? So we have a big discussion. And then, actually, I think I've missed. I don't know, for some reason I've missed a slide. We play Pac-Man. And Pac-Man is a game where everybody will sort of stand around the room and I will just say a statement in Japanese. So it's dance o shimasu. And somebody will put their hand up, and if they get it right and say, oh, I do dancing. I say, hi. They get to take 2 steps, tap somebody on the shoulder. That person sits down. It's a really quick translation game, if you like. It's all about understanding what I'm saying. And all of this is scaffolding up until they start their own stories. Well, actually not their own story yet. I do teach a little bit of Hiragana, and what I've found works is I'll teach des, mas, masen, and mashita, because if they can read the ending part of the verb, I feel that they're getting an introduction to Hiragana, but it's not essential for understanding Japanese. And I use Hiragana in 48 minutes. And these, let me see, the pictures on the back of this are from the Japan Foundation Sydney Classroom Resources. If students want to do their own Hiragana study, I've asked somebody, I haven't actually used the Duolingo app for Japanese, but I am using Duolingo for Spanish, which I'm actually loving. And I wanted to put myself in the position of learning a new language just to remind myself of what it's like. There's a writing booklet from MLC, and I've got a link there which students can use at home. This is for the ones who really want to get into Hiragana before they hit high school. Oh, here's my Pac-Man game. So there's no penalty for an incorrect answer. I just want them to understand what I'm saying. I'm not sure if you can see in the background. Along here, I've got my animals, and that's just in Hiragana for the zodiac story. And along the back wall, actually below that, I've got my numbers 1 to 10 in kanji. Along the window side, I've got my days of the week. So I've tried to limit what I have sitting, hanging in the classroom. And I tell the students, as long as they know where to look for the information, that's okay. Because once a fortnight, I think is really hard to expect a student to remember stuff. As long as they know where to find it and they can understand what I'm doing at the time, and they enjoy it, that's fine. I do use worksheets in the sense that what I've learned is I've got to have a balance between doing the activities and actually seeing stuff in the worksheets. What I find is really good, for revision, it's very easy for me to differentiate. I can have them translate from Japanese to English. Harder is English to Japanese, and then even trying to write their own sentences. And I can use that one. I've actually got this one sheet that I've created, which I used from grade 3 through to grade 6. If you want to use it, you can use it as a pre-test and a post-test. I try and sell it to students as this is in preparation for Kahoots or quizzes or, using Quizlet. It's really handy to leave for a CRT, which is a casual relief teacher, if you give them an answer sheet. So, and a worksheet is only ever going to be work that I've already covered in the classroom. So this is what I found with my grade 5s and 6s. I don't know how, but they hadn't been introduced to Momotaro, the peach boy. So I thought, well, this is a great example, a great opportunity for me to revise colours and introduce imas. So remember, we've talked about imasen, somebody's not here. Well, Hello Kitty ga imasen. There's no Hello Kitty in the picture. And when I've photocopied this just onto an A5 page, which would fit into their books later. I don't waste any time gluing things into their books. They can do that in their classroom. I've also lost my classroom. The building has been demolished. We're getting renovations, so I'll be travelling around again for the rest of the year. When I give this to the students, I tell them, have a look. I said, there's no English on this page. So if you can understand what's going on, and I go through it first, I speak, I read it first, so that they can understand what's going on. I found that I did try doing this as an activity for arimas, and what I found is they actually needed to see it written down first. So we talk through it. I'm using Japanese as I'm explaining everything that's going on, and then we did this existence verbs, because this is it's actually quite tricky problem-solving activity. After doing that, then we can play Go Fish. I did do the Go Fish activity before the worksheet, and I asked them, so how helpful was this Go Fish activity for you? And one of the boys said, well, it was fun, but I didn't really learn anything. So I thought, right, don't do it in that order. I need to go back and teach arimas a different way, which is why I came up with that worksheet. And I actually asked that same student, I said, did this work better in the, do you think it would have been better if I'd shown you this before we played Go Fish? And he said, yes. And I asked a few students the same question, and they said yes. So I'm always trying to revise what I'm teaching or actually how I'm teaching by asking for student feedback. This was an easy thing to differentiate. Some students would just, they had to ask in Japanese, but some students could just answer hi. Somebody could say hi arimasu, or they say hi arimasu dozo. And I've realised what I need to do is I need to give the students more opportunity to speak. So somebody asked previously, you know, we were doing that 30-second speaking practice from the first session. I've got to figure out how to do that. So I might have sentences up on the TV screen. We might all say it together so that they're actually saying it, but not worrying about their pronunciation if it's sort of lost with everybody else. Don't quite know how I'm going to do that yet. So I've yet to teach this part, but this is the next part of my my puzzle, ski janai, amari ski janai, and I'll get the students to do a survey. And once we've got some of the students have finished, then I'll be able to use that data and, I don't know, probably make up some sort of game. Let me see, listening comprehension. So this term, I've been trying to introduce mottainai grammar, which the kids have loved. And that actually ties in with our grade 3 sustainability that they're doing for their inquiry. And here I'm teaching, you know, the gesture of correct and incorrect. I have access to 7 mini iPads, and at least once a term, we will play Kahoot or quizzes. Actually, the kids love Kahoot, and we play in groups. So one group of 3 or 4 students will compete all against it, you know, each other in the class. So I use this for whole class revision. I've actually got to put up a couple of Kahoots for the school holidays, and I'll post that to our class dojo that we use for communicating with staff, with students and parents that we used. It's already been set up for remote learning. Regarding student feedback and agency, last year I asked them for their honest but respectful feedback. It could be anonymous. I wanted to know what they thought about the way I taught last term. What could I do to improve? And this term, I'll be asking how can they demonstrate their learning and give them some certain, some options to choose from. Last term, because of time, I felt the time constraint, everybody did a mini book that I scaffolded, and they really just filled in the nouns to change the story. Just a couple of examples. I think you made Japanese much more interesting this year, and especially term. You were more engaging, and I loved all the mini games. Of course, I love Kahoot the most, but I really enjoyed Japanese this year. It was really fun writing about my story about my little yellow duck. Japanese was very good this term. So I know I'm on the right track. Now it's a case of using what I've learned this morning as well and getting my planning right. So my takeaway, and I was going to put in an example of the mini book, which I've got somewhere. Actually, it's all in a Google file that I'll upload later on. So keep the scaffolded mini book. Keep a balance of activities between the games and the written work. Create revision Kahoots for home. Use real scenarios for picture talks. Create more opportunities for clarification and different class stories to build a library. So this is what my master plan at the moment. The cat story, and the cat story is literally neko desu, akai neko desu, because they see the red cat, and then they're going to fill in the blanks about the cat. So, for example, the cat might be, the next little page is tennisu o shimasu. karate o shimasen. And then they'll draw a picture of a cat playing tennis and a cat not doing karate. So the cat dressed as in karate gi with a cross. It might, kohi o nomimasu, kora o nomimasen. And then they'll draw a picture of coffee and with a tick maybe, and then the cola, Coca-Cola without, with a cross. So they're choosing the nouns that go into this story. Pardon me. Next stop for me is I'm trying to get us to create our own stories. And the story that we're aiming for is we're going to be going to a party. It'll be on Saturday. And I don't have to spend time teaching the days of the week. They just need to know where the days of the week are in the year. And I'll show them where it sits in a sentence. And then somebody will be going to the party. Somebody's not going to the party. My next stop is to teach ikimasu, ikimasen at the party, or they're going with somebody, they meet somebody. We can do introductions. We can talk about there's a big cake, but there isn't little oranges. You know, one of those silly stories. So, arigatou gozaimashita. Any questions? Yeah, I don't know what time it is. Oh, that went longer. Sorry.
No, you're about right. We have so thank you. That's awesome to see how some of this stuff can happen in primary, because people often ask me, like, how would you do this in primary? And I think a big part of that is what you're talking about, like really reducing it down even further, and just keeping the nice simple story. And you can still do stuff, even if it's not starting with the hiragana right away. That doesn't mean they can't speak.